Hi, this is Mark. In this video we'll take a look at the tone node. So we've already explored the highlight node. Now we're going to take a look at this tone node. You'll see that it has the same inputs and outputs, similar to the highlight. That's because you need to import the image and the matte on the left, same as we did with the highlight module. Now it works pretty much the same way. We're just going to tack it on, and instead of lightening the character, what it does is it darkens the character. It creates a multiply operation as long as you're using the traditional way. If you do a multiplicative, it actually works the opposite. So remember how we had light blending properly when we used a multiplicative mode for your highlight. Now when you work with a tone, the default operation is multiplicative. So when you actually click this option on, what you're actually getting is a normal blending mode. Let's take a look at that. So I can basically have the light hitting here and maybe have the opposite of the light hitting on the other side, so creating a tone shadow. So I'm going to go again and grab a peg apply transformation from the move category, and I'm going to use the original character and offset it this way. So let's drag a peg because we need to determine where that's going to be moved, and because the tone is exactly where the character is, it's toning the entire character right now. So we don't want that. So let's make sure that we reverse that. We can double click on the little mask icon, or we can click the invert matte option here. So now it's the opposite of it. So wherever the matte is not showing, we'll reveal it. So I'm going to take that move tool and I'm going to offset it top right so that we have an offset here. Essentially what's happening is it's saying tone everything except where this shape is, and since this shape is exactly there, just offset, then it's revealing the sliver that we want to tone. If we just render this, we'll see that it already darkens against the light. It's good to keep in mind that when you do an offset, you might get these little areas that extend out, and you might not want these parts. You might want to create a shape to cut that away, or maybe you want to be more forgiving with a blurred tone. So what we can do is we can up the radius here to say a 5. And now you can see that it's a lot more subtle and it blends more naturally. Same as our highlight, we can add a color to this tone. So maybe we'll go to our color picker and choose a bluish kind of tint so that it darkens against it. And this might be a little strong, so let's reduce some saturation and value here. Let's bump that up a bit, maybe reduce that a bit so that it looks really nice. Now if you do a multiplicative mode, what happens is it adds more like paint on top as opposed to light interacting. As you can see, it's gone yellow as I push towards the blue, and if you recall our previous lesson, multiplicative takes the opposite end of the color spectrum. So since we actually want the blue this time, we're going to pick the yellow, which is at the other end of the color spectrum. So there you go, now we have the nice blue. Let's drop the saturation a bit because we don't want it to be too colorful. We want it to be just a subtle shadow, and then you can play with your value to either make it lighter or darker in the multiplicative way. Now let's say I actually want to cut this piece away. What I can do is a new drawing, and I can cut this piece out of the offset. However, this is where we want to do something similar up here, where right now we're just using the opposite to show the tone, but if we want to cut a piece away, here's what's going to happen. We're going to get the reverse operation of what we want. I'll just simply add the drawing and cut it away, which is what we want to do. I'll pick my comp palette and a color, and using a brush, I'll simply draw a little red nub here because I want to take it off of the face. What happens is we get the reverse. Because we said this tone is taking the opposite of what I'm giving it, then anything that we've cut away is what's revealing the tone. So what we want to do is actually go back to a normal tone, and instead of doing the inverse at the tone level, we want to do it here at the peg level. So I'm going to add a cutter, and I'm going to do the same thing that I did up here. I'm going to dictate what goes into the tone as opposed to making the tone choose the operation. I'll wire the character down to this cutter, and then I'll connect it to the offset, and I'll plug it into the matte. So you see that we're back to our original tone offset, and now in order to cut this away, we just have to add a composite here to say we want to cut it by the offset and we want to cut it by this new shape. So I'll do Control H for a new composite, and I will wire the drawing inside. And notice how this just goes away now. Of course, you might get a hard edge from this drawing, so we want to make sure that we blur that slightly. We're going to add a blur radial here. And we're going to blur this, say, maybe a 2. So now we have a blurred drawing cutting away the offset so that it doesn't blend into the face. And so that's cutting the original character, which is what we are using as the tone. If we want to see what's going on, we can simply go to a display. You can see that if I didn't have the drawing connected, we would see that piece, but instead we have it cut away with a nice blur, and the sliver that's left is what's getting toned here. And so this gives us a nice highlight and a nice tone, framing our character properly in a lit environment. Now remember that this is an offset tone. You could also just simply draw drawings specifically for the areas that you want to tone a character. This is a quicker, easier way to work with the tones as opposed to drawing frame by frame your animation to match your character. So you have multiple options when you want to tone, using either multiplicative or normal modes, the same as you would in a highlight node.